So Ozzy Osbourne is now a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee as a solo artist. He was previously inducted as a member of Black Sabbath with him, Tony, Bill, and Geezer. A four-man band that was tremendous back in the day. So Ozzy gets in as an inductee and it's a solo, but he might not be in there if it wasn't for Sharon Osbourne. Sharon Osbourne saved his life in so many ways and made him richer. So Sharon first met Ozzy in 1970. Her dad was a music promoter and he did some work with Sabbath. So she met Ozzy then. She comes back around in 1979. 1979, Sabbath fires Ozzy because he kept on doing too many substances. And I think they were tired of Ozzy. Ozzy might have been tired of them. They fire Ozzy and then pick up the great Ronnie James Dio, a short guy with a big voice. Shout out to Dio. So he replaces Ozzy, and then Ozzy's just adrift. Sharon comes back into his life and agrees to manage him. And they get married in 1982, and then they have Jack and Kelly after that, and their other daughter that we never see. But yeah, but Sharon, she gave structure to Ozzy. It reminds me of Robert Downey Jr. and his wife. He met his wife on the film Gothica, the Halle Berry film, where his wife was a producer. But he didn't know her at first. And Robert himself was coming off drugs and all that stuff. And Robert's one of those creative guys that probably need structure. And him and his wife been married for a long time because I think she gives him that structure. And Sharon gave Ozzy structure, even though Ozzy over the years still did substances and still probably cheated on Sharon, where she probably could have left Ozzy. Like, she's the wife and the manager. She could have left him as a manager. It's like, I can be your wife, not your manager. She could have stayed as manager and left him as his wife. So I can't deal with this anymore, but I'll still manage you. Or she could have left him as a manager and a wife. Say, I'm out of here. I just can't take this anymore. But she stayed. They're still together. They're still together after all these years because she loves that fella, right? That's love right there. So she gave him structure, even though he was still problematic, but she gave him structure. She later created Ozzfest with Ozzy. The Osbournes was probably still her idea as well, where now Ozzy's no longer the guy who bit the head off the bat because he thought it was fake and he had to get rabies shots. He's now Jack and Kelly's dad who walks around not knowing what's going on. So it kind of takes the dangerousness out of his rock persona. It kind of reminds me of Joker. I won't say what it is in Joker 2. There's a scene where Lady Gaga looks at Arthur Fleck differently. That's all I'll say. But yeah, so the shine of Ozzy as being like this dangerous guy got rubbed off a bit off the Osbournes. But if we go back to the music part, Ozzy still had quite a few hits. In after Black Sabbath, he had Bark at the Moon, Shine in the Dark, Mama I'm Coming Home, No More Tears, Crazy Train. Crazy Train is important because that features Randy Rhoads. Randy Rhoads was one of the greatest guitarists ever. One of the co-founders of Quiet Riot before they blew up on MTV. So he was part of Quiet Riot like around 77, 78. And then Ozzy leads Black Sabbath. Sharon is putting together this auditions. And a guy from, I think a bassist from Slaughter, I think, told Randy he needs to audition because Randy was so good. Randy didn't want to leave Quiet Riot. That's his band, but he went to audition anyway. Goes to the audition, gets the gig. And he makes he was on Ozzy's 2 first albums. And he died in 1982 at 25. It's so crazy. He shouldn't have died. Like, they were on tour. The tour bus stopped. There was by some airfield. There was a pilot. I don't know the full story, but if you know the full story, type it below. The pilot took some of the people that was in the tour bus up flying around. And he kept on getting close to the tour bus because Ozzy was asleep and another guy from the band was asleep. So he kept on buzzing around the tour bus. And so he did that 2 times with two sets of people. And then the third time Randy Rhoads was on that plane and the plane clipped the bus, lost its wing, crashed, and everybody died on that plane. Nobody on the tour bus got hurt, but the people on the plane died. It was unnecessary. So that dude lost his life because the pilot was an idiot. Unbelievable. But yeah, so Randy Rhoads is like one of the greatest guitarists ever. So Ozzy had hits. It wasn't like, now listen, Ozzy wasn't putting out hits like Springsteen in the 80s. Like, like he didn't have like a Born in USA type thing. But you have to look at it. Sabbath started like around in the early 70s. Ozzy is not competing against, in the 80s, against like Bon Jovi, Poison, Motley Crue, bands who grew up listening to Black Sabbath. And now these young guys are his competitors, his peers, and he's hanging in there. Like, right? Like, again, Ozzy wasn't Bon Jovi or Motley Crue during that time span, but he had enough hits during that era where it's like, yeah, I can fit in. I can go on tour with Def Leppard. I can go on tour with Motley Crue, and everything's good. And then eventually to create Ozzfest, one of the best rock and roll festivals ever. So Ozzy post Sabbath had a great career, but that's all because Sharon was in his life. Again, I don't think we'd be here without Sharon. Going back to Sabbath for a second before I go. WWE, they have this thing called War Games, and every year they play War Pigs. And I think last year they played, T-Pain did a version of War Pigs. War Pigs is a song by Black Sabbath. And I went back to listen, and the T-Pain version actually is pretty good. But I listened to the original. I keep on listening to the original because the way they produced that song, Bill's drumming on that is almost like they had. I almost want to know how they set up the mics on that. Just the guitar. War Pigs is such a great tune, and this is like after Paranoid and Iron Man. Black Sabbath was such a great band, and it just makes me wonder, where did they get that sound from? This is heavy metal before they turned it heavy metal. Like, heavy was like them and Led Zeppelin. They were heavier than the Stones. Both of these groups were heavier than the Beatles, and it makes me wonder where they get that sound from. Yeah, like Led Zeppelin was influenced by blues, but it's a harder blues. Sabbath was almost like, what is this sound? That's the only bad thing about rock and roll today. And maybe there are bands that's innovative like Sabbath that we don't get to listen to. But the last time I thought of I think of a innovative band is probably Linkin Park back in the 2000s, where you heard something that was new, it's old, but different, but new. But they were innovative. And I can't think of another rock act that's come through during, you had emo rock, you had emo rock in the 2000s. But I don't know if I can't put Fall Out Boy in the same category as Black Sabbath. I like Fall Out Boy. And then emo rock was a thing, but I don't know if I could. Sabbath was its own different entity, man. Just like Linkin Park was its own thing. It's almost like, what is this? This is new. This is a different sound we haven't heard before. And we don't get those sounds of rock music anymore. And I think eventually rock would come back, but it got to be genre pushing, like Sabbath. Like, you just listen to those, you put some headphones on and listen to that production. It's like, well, how did they produce this? Like, how did they have the microphones? Like today, if I want to produce anything, I can watch a YouTube video. I can pick up a book. I go to the library, pick up a book. I can watch a TikTok. There's so many places for me to learn how to produce a song. But if you're these guys and you're in the late 60s, early 1970s, like, what are you doing? Like, you listen to the Stones, you maybe watch something about the Beatles, but just like, yeah, but you're these poor kids in the UK, and you just trying to figure things out. Sabbath is just great. So shout out to Ozzy Osbourne for making it into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a solo. Shout out to Sharon Osbourne, who should also get an award. And shout out to that bat that Ozzy bit. Sorry, man. The dude thought you were fake. How's that even happen?